At another level, it's multi-layered. This is Abraham George from our first cohort who came today, which tells you that there's a sense of belonging in this vision project. We were looking for quantitative outcomes for this project, very concrete things that people need to make sure that their rights and responsibilities are never abused, and to give them, as Carol did so well, labor market employment strategies and an increased knowledge because of the participation of our community partners and all the resources that we also handed on to them, that they live in a community with a lot of resources. And to understand in a microcosm a Canadian institution, because in Canada, education systems are one of the key institutions. Not all countries have the same investment in education systems as a way of defining culture, but we do in Canada, and that's why education ministers often have a mission to create their stamp on the education system, because they know that that education system creates the culture of the next generation. So it's really in many ways not just about them going in to see the kids or to practice in the schools, it's to see our cultural processes in action. And I think at many levels this happens subtly and overtly in their practice, in their placement. Next one. So we have the 7 days of training, and we spend a lot of time, and so we try to make that as experiential as possible. But the ultimate experience is the application of their learning in the school system. So I put down 35 schools. It may have been more. I think it was more than that. That's pretty impressive. It meant that there's a two-way thing happening. Not only do we have 120 some odd newcomers make a trip into the culture, one of the cultural institutions of Canada, but we had that cultural institution receive them and learn from them more than they knew before. And so the accommodation of the host, in this case community, which was York Region District School Board for the most part in this project, meant that we are always building better understanding and better relationships of the multiplicity of cultures that came to the schools. As you said, Yasmin, how many? 27 different cultures. We know that there are that many cultures in the school, but it's a different experience for a teacher to be working with somebody who's a specialist in French. Today at lunch, one of our participants who was an French language specialist, her teacher came to have lunch because she said it was so exciting to work with somebody from another country who also spoke French. So those relationships are beginning to be created. That can't help. It's like the ripple in the pond, right? You never know what that will look like 5 years from now. They also get feedback. Some of it's overt feedback. Some of it is subtle feedback that, oh, that's not how it's done here. Oh, I mustn't say Miss So-and-so. Oh, I should be more formal, less formal. There's a lot of subtle learning that goes on in their placement. And there's some very concrete things that happen. They get resources, they get a certificate, and they have something more to build on. We wish, and in some cases we wish there could be more that we could do at longer periods of time that they can volunteer, but we also know that many of them continue to volunteer when the program is over, because the teachers and the children are saying, why are you going? Why are you going? Because it really they have really made a contribution to the life of the school. So there is your win-win. There's nothing to beat that. So the participatory aspect of it is that we evaluated it to death. So we evaluated, I meant to bring up the huge binder that I have of the evaluation forms from every cohort. So we evaluated every session in minute detail, and then it was put into a spreadsheet. And interestingly enough, when you have people from another country who are in a program, they're very, very kind and very polite. So you have to tell them that, it's nice that you think that you should be nice, but we actually want to know what you really think. And so over time, we persuaded them to tell us what they really thought. And that was very helpful. And that's part of the fact is that they felt trusted enough to be given the right to give their real opinion. So sometimes they'd say, no, that was really inadequate, or we already knew that, or it was confusing. And in some cases, we really changed significantly what was offered to them as a result of their feedback. So over time, we ended yesterday with our debrief, which is a fabulous day because they're so glad to see each other. They've been apart for 3 months, and they have experienced all this great stuff that they've done at the schools. They have so many stories, and we take them through, partly to acknowledge that they miss each other, that they have made a network, they have made connections. They come back and they tell each other their strengths, their hopes, and their wishes for each other, which is quite touching. And I think it's very real. You saw the closeness that they have. But we also asked them to do a very lengthy debrief of everything, every aspect of the program. So they write away in this 7-page evaluation form for an hour in another language than their own, very kindly giving us feedback. So that's why you won't get a whole action research report today, because it just happened, right? But what's amazing to me is the willingness and the seriousness with which they approach that project. And then we have a World Cafe in the afternoon. And the World Cafe is a very interesting exercise. I don't know if anybody ever participated in a World Cafe exercise. Basically, you have an issue and you move from table to table, sharing your insights and your suggestions, but also having a dialogue across the table. And so often we don't have those dialogues across the table. And in those dialogues, information that all the evaluation in the world, I can try. I will never get the information that comes out in those World Cafes. And Yasmin is particularly good at getting, these amazing things out of people in the World Cafes. And they draw great pictures, and they talk, and they laugh hysterically. But there's also some really serious stuff that is from the other side of their brain, maybe. Their right brain or their left brain. I can never get right brain, right? So so we try to do a whole process to get at all aspects of their experience. So that's it. That's our process. So this is the vision path. When people come to us, they've often done some stuff. Sometimes they've been doing it for quite a long time. They've done their pre-settlement and their early settlement. They've prepared to come, they've tried, they've done their language training often, and they've done some work search. I would say the majority of the people in this program, because of the parameters of Citizenship and Immigration's project, were newer than the majority of the people that participated in the GIP program. So therefore, they had come and they had a particular sort of agenda and path that didn't quite unfold as they would have wished. So I think what I see is the things that we have done is that I would wish, looking at some of the people that we've had in our program, is that they would have come sooner, and that we could have captured them before they were nearly desperate because their money was going to run out. And that's hard to have a productive program when you're worrying about, you can hear the clock ticking and the bank phoning you. So, however, I think that the timely outreach to them, getting them in and interacting with them, and placing them in an institution is all about the growing social inclusion aspect. And social inclusion is one of the core sort of themes that is embedded in the vision path, which ultimately leads to social integration. So we're looking just as an overview, and most of you already know these things, but next slide. The emerging opportunities and challenges. I've lived in the New York region on and off since 1980. And in that time, the population has flowed through here in increasing numbers and increasing diversity and increasing rapidity. So it's really, really hard to keep track and to keep up with the demands of the emerging group. So it's required in a sort of turn on the dime approach from the service providers. It also means that we're dealing with the fact that our newcomers over the long term are doing less well than they did 10 or 15 years ago. So this is having a wearing down effect on them at a personal and economic level, but it also has an impact on us as a region, in York Region, because, you know, more than half of our community comes from somewhere else. And that's serious. One of the things that's happening to us is that we have a recession that's exacerbated when we're still having this massive number of very, very highly trained and highly skilled professionals coming, who are leaders in their own country, coming to our country at a time when there are no jobs, or hardly any jobs. And it's heartbreaking for that reason. There's longer periods before employment. And because I used to work as an associate with the conference board, there was always the emphasis on productivity, you know, our national productivity, et cetera, et cetera. Huge loss in productivity in Canada because we can't utilize the skills of these people. As a result, there's less participation because they're doing what they can to survive. There's less participation in the larger civic institutions and all the other parts of community life that really make you feel part of Canada. And often we see, and we've heard the stories here, how often they feel marginalized and isolated. And this has an impact on their mental health, on the health of their families, on marriages, and on the impact of children in those families. So that, you know, there's our menu of things that most of you are dealing with if you're a service provider every day. So it's hard to know where to start. When I was looking at the whole project, and I'm writing a manual and a toolkit, and then I'll be doing the action research, and one of the things that struck me is that we really can't talk about vision without talking about GIVE, because GIVE itself was an amazing example of a best practice. And so both of you have spoken about the fact that, you know, there was this sort of collaborative approach. But what, you know, in my research, I've discovered that what you did was actually very unique, and that I think it needs to be reproduced more often, right? So if you can go to the next picture, which would be the